There's a machine running across the middle of America right now, and it doesn't have an off switch. It's a relentless conveyor belt of severe thunderstorms that's going to keep spinning out dangerous weather, day after day, for more than a week. It's the kind of pattern that meteorologists talk about in hushed tones, the kind that makes emergency managers nervous, the kind that keeps forecasters up at night. More than 50 million people are in the path of this machine. It's bringing damaging winds that can level trees, flash flooding that can wash away roads, and a heat dome that's pushing feels-like temperatures past 115 degrees. And here's what makes this truly remarkable. This pattern is going to persist. It's not going to break down after a day or two. It's going to keep going. This is not an ordinary August. Forecasters are calling this pattern something we simply haven't seen in years. The last time we had a stretch this persistent in the middle of August was probably 4 or 5 years ago. And that's what makes this week so significant. If you want to understand what's driving this and how to stay safe, stick around. I'll break it all down day by day, threat by threat, and region by region. Because when a pattern like this locks in, knowledge isn't just power, it's survival. Let me start by explaining the single idea that makes sense of this entire week. The whole pattern starts with one thing: a massive dome of high pressure parked over the southern plains. This feature is sometimes called a heat dome because it traps hot air underneath it, like a lid on a pot. This dome is sitting like a boulder in the middle of a river. The jet stream, which normally flows straight across the country from west to east, can't push through it. So the jet stream is forced to flow up and over and around its northern edge. That curving path around the top of the dome becomes a highway for storms. Disturbance after disturbance rides that highway from the high plains down through the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, firing off round after round of severe weather. It's like a conveyor belt that never stops. The heat dome isn't shutting the storms down, it's steering them. It's like a conveyor belt of thunderstorms circling its rim. And every time a disturbance comes around the corner, it taps into the warmth and moisture of the Gulf of Mexico and explodes into a severe storm complex. And here's the problem. The models don't show this dome breaking down anytime soon. The long-range guidance suggests this pattern could persist through the end of the week, and possibly into the weekend. That means this storm machine is going to keep running, day after day after day. This is what makes this pattern so unusual. It's not any single storm, it's the relentlessness, the sheer number of consecutive days with severe weather threats. This is the kind of pattern we haven't seen in August for years. August is normally a transitional month for severe weather. We get occasional storms, but they're usually scattered and short-lived. Not this week. This pattern is dangerous for 3 specific reasons. Each one on its own would be a cause for concern. Together, they create a recipe for disaster. First, the storms are relentless. As long as that heat dome stays parked, storms just keep spinning around its edge. This isn't a one-day event. It's going to keep going for a week or more. And when you have that many days in a row of severe weather, the cumulative impact becomes much greater than any single day. Second, the storms are going to train over the same areas. Training is a weather term that describes storms that move repeatedly over the same ground, like train cars on a track. One storm moves through, then another, all following the exact same path. When that happens, the rain adds up quickly. The ground doesn't get a chance to dry out between rounds. Third, these storms will be moisture-laden. Hourly rainfall rates of 2 to 3 inches are possible. Storm totals could be 6 inches or more in areas where storms pummel the same location on more than one day. And when you combine that with the training effect, you get flash flooding that can happen in minutes. When you put all 3 together, relentless storms, training, and extreme rainfall rates, you get a recipe for serious flash flooding. And that's exactly why the Weather Prediction Center has issued multiple days of excessive rainfall outlooks for the Ohio, Valley, and Central Appalachians. So let's walk through it, starting with today. A complex of severe thunderstorms is already ongoing, born from earlier activity and surviving overnight into the Ohio Valley and Central Appalachians. These are the kind of storms that don't fade away with the sunset. They keep going, feeding on the warm, moist air that's streaming north from the Gulf of Mexico. Through the course of the day, multiple other severe thunderstorm lines are expected to emerge along an alley from the lower Midwest to the mid-Atlantic. This isn't going to be a few scattered storms. We're talking about organized lines of severe weather that could produce widespread damaging winds. The Storm Prediction Center has issued an enhanced risk, a 3 out of 5 on the severe weather scale, from far eastern Iowa and northern Illinois to northeastern Kentucky and southwestern Ohio. This is a significant level of risk. It means that widespread severe weather is likely. Chicago, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Lexington are all in the threat zone. That's millions of people who need to be paying attention today. Widely scattered damaging gusts could reach up to 75 millirichters. That's enough to bring down trees and power lines, and a tornado or two are possible. While tornadoes aren't the primary threat in this pattern, any tornado that does form in this moist, unstable environment could be significant. All right, the tricky part of this forecast is timing. It's very difficult to forecast the exact timing of these storm complexes. That is still the work of much research in the meteorological world. The storms are going to fire, but exactly when and where the most intense cells develop is still uncertain. While all hazards are on the table, damaging wind is the primary concern across this pattern. And that's worth paying attention to because damaging wind events can be just as destructive as tornadoes. They just affect a much larger area. A few gusts over 75 km/h are possible in some of the stronger storm complexes. That's the kind of wind that doesn't just rattle windows, it tears roofs off buildings and uproots trees. To put that in perspective, 75 mph winds can bring down large trees, knock out power to thousands of homes, cause structural damage to buildings, make driving extremely dangerous, and create wind-blown debris that becomes airborne projectiles. The most widespread destructive winds could unfold in a complex of storms that tracks from eastern Iowa and northern Illinois on Tuesday morning to parts of Indiana and Ohio by Tuesday afternoon or early evening. That means the damage threat isn't isolated to one small area. It's going to span hundreds of miles. Trees could be downed and power knocked out from the Midwest to the mid-Atlantic. We're talking about millions of people who could lose power in this event. And with multiple rounds of storms expected, power restoration could take days in some areas. Now, let me explain why the flooding threat is so serious, because this is the part of the forecast that concerns me most. Training storms are the real danger in this pattern. As storms move repeatedly over the same areas, the rain adds up quickly. And when the ground is already saturated, even a moderate amount of rain can cause significant flooding. Hourly rainfall rates of 2 to 3 inches are possible in some of the heavier storms. That means you could get a month's worth of rain in a single hour. And if that happens over already saturated ground, the water has nowhere to go. As a result, a flood watch has been issued for a good chunk of the region, and more counties are being added still. The National Weather Service is watching this pattern very closely because the potential for significant flooding is real. A level 3 of 4 threat of flooding rainfall covers southeast Ohio and central West Virginia. That's a significant level of concern. It means that widespread flooding is possible, and some areas could see life-threatening flash flooding. Charleston, West Virginia, Cincinnati, and Indianapolis are just a few of the cities in the flood threat zone on multiple days this week. These are populated areas with infrastructure that's vulnerable to flooding. The problem with this pattern is the moist environment. Thunderstorms will be moisture-laden and capable of producing very heavy rainfall rates. The atmosphere over the Ohio Valley is unusually moist for August, which means these storms will be efficient rain producers. Storm totals could be 6 inches or more in areas where storms pummel the same location on more than one day. That's a significant amount of water. In steep terrain, that water has to go somewhere, and it's going to go downhill fast. Now, let me explain why West Virginia and the Central Appalachians are at such high risk. Because this is the region that could see the most serious flooding impacts. When you combine days of cumulative rainfall with the steep, runoff-prone terrain of West Virginia, the flash flood threat becomes significantly more dangerous. This isn't flat farmland. This is mountains and valleys. In steep terrain, water has only one place to go: down. Rain that falls on the ridges funnels straight down into narrow creeks and hollows, and those creeks can rise with terrifying speed, putting water across valley roads in what feels like minutes. In the 2016 West Virginia floods, water levels rose so quickly that people had no time to escape. That's the kind of flash flooding we're talking about. This region has suffered devastating, deadly flash floods before. In June 2016, West Virginia experienced catastrophic flooding that killed 23 people and destroyed hundreds of homes. That event was driven by a similar pattern of training storms. The setup this week has some of the same fingerprints. Urban, low-lying, and poor drainage areas, as well as the mountainous parts of West Virginia, will be most prone to flooding. That's not just rural communities. Cities like Charleston and Huntington could also see significant impacts. Some roads are likely to flood. Creeks and streams could also overflow their banks. And if you're in a valley, that water has nowhere to go but into your home. The National Weather Service is warning that some roads may become impassable, and people should avoid traveling through flooded areas. Now let's move to Tuesday, because the pattern isn't going anywhere. Tuesday brings another large, severe weather threat, with an elevated risk zone running from the Chicago area all the way back into Kentucky and Virginia. The Storm Prediction Center has already highlighted this area for potential severe weather. A level 3 out of 5 severe storm risk threatens portions of the region. That's the same level of risk we're seeing today. It means that widespread severe weather is possible and some storms could be significant. Chicago, Indianapolis, and Columbus are under the level 3 risk. These are major population centers with millions of people. The potential impacts could be significant. Tuesday's headline hazard is significant damaging wind, potentially 75 mph gusts from around Chicago back into West Virginia. This isn't just a few isolated gusts. We're talking about widespread damaging winds across a large area. There will likely be a big line of storms firing in Wisconsin and Illinois late Tuesday morning, producing widespread damaging wind of 60 to 75 millibars. It'll only spread and intensify through the afternoon. These lines of storms are known as derechos when they produce widespread damaging winds over a long path. That line will then push toward Virginia during the late evening and overnight into early Wednesday. So this isn't a daytime-only event. The storms will keep going through the night. A few tornadoes are possible, though this is likely more of a straight-line wind event with any tornadoes embedded within a line of storms, rather than forming as isolated supercells. But embedded tornadoes can be just as dangerous as any other tornado. And you probably already see where this is going, because Wednesday brings yet another round. Although storm activity will gradually weaken overnight, the overall setup is expected to maintain a severe threat farther east into the mid-Atlantic for Wednesday. This pattern doesn't want to let go. This pattern will likely last well into Wednesday before turning into a multi-day threat for the rest of the week. If you live in the Ohio Valley or the Mid-Atlantic, you need to be prepared for multiple days of severe weather. Because repeated rounds of training storms are targeting the exact same saturated areas, a level 2 risk remains in place all the way through Friday morning for major hubs like Chicago, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh. That means the risk of severe weather continues for days. Flood watches are now in place through Friday morning across portions of Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, northeastern Kentucky, western Virginia, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. The National Weather Service is keeping the flood threat in place for multiple days because the ground simply won't have time to dry out between storms. The National Weather Service precipitation forecast shows significant rain totals over the next 7 days in Ohio, ranging from 1 inch in northeast Ohio to as much as 6 inches in southern Ohio. A few heavier isolated amounts are possible. That's a huge range, and the heaviest amounts will depend on where the training storm set up. The pattern should ease up this weekend when storm-killing high pressure arrives, but until then, the storm machine keeps running. And that means the threat of severe weather, flash flooding, and damaging winds remains. Now let me shift to the other half of the country. Because while the north deals with storms, the south is dealing with the heat that's driving all of it. That dome of high pressure is the same feature-pumping temperatures higher across the southern plains and the southeast. It's the engine that's driving this entire pattern. The heaviest heat will hit the southern plains, with the heat index sweltering above the century mark and even grazing 110 degrees in spots. That's not just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. East of the Mississippi River, the south and east coast will top out in the mid to upper 90s. That means anyone spending time outside needs to be careful and stay hydrated. Overnight lows in the south central plains will stall in the 80s. Warm low temperatures, such as these, in combination with the high humidity, can lead to an increased risk of heat-related illness. The body needs a nighttime break from the heat to recover, and when that break doesn't come, the risk of heat exhaustion and heat stroke rises dramatically. Heat is consistently one of the deadliest forms of weather, even though it never produces the dramatic footage that a tornado does. It kills more people than tornadoes, floods, and hurricanes combined in an average year. That's a statistic that should make everyone pay attention. Extreme heat warnings and heat advisories are prevalent across the region. These aren't just suggestions. They're official warnings that conditions are dangerous. If you're anywhere under that dome, treat the heat with the same seriousness as the storms up north. Hydrate constantly. Avoid the hottest parts of the day. Check on the vulnerable, the elderly, young children, anyone without air conditioning. A simple knock on a neighbor's door can save a life. Now let me introduce the third piece of this remarkable pattern, because there's something else happening in the Atlantic that could affect the East Coast. After a remarkably quiet summer in the tropics, the Atlantic is finally starting to stir. A tropical wave near the eastern Caribbean is being monitored by the National Hurricane Center with a chance of development this week. This is worth watching because it's entering an area where sea surface temperatures are very warm. If the system develops and moves north, it could potentially bring rainfall to the East Coast later this week or next. But let me be clear, it's way too early to know with any confidence where the system will go. The uncertainty is high. But I want you to understand something about hurricane season. We're entering the peak period in the Atlantic. Late August to mid-September is when we typically see the most hurricane activity. So even though the season has been quiet so far, that doesn't mean it's going to stay quiet. It only takes one hurricane to change the narrative of an entire season. So while there's no need to panic, it's a good time to make sure you know your hurricane plan if you live on the coast. Now let me bring it back to you and what actually matters for your safety over the next several days. If you're anywhere in the Midwest or Ohio Valley, treat every afternoon, evening, and overnight period as a time to stay weather aware. Have more than one way to receive warnings, and make sure at least one of them can wake you from sleep. Know where your safe spot is before a warning is issued. The overnight rounds are the most dangerous. That's when people are asleep, when they're least able to react. And that's when the most deadly flash flooding and wind events occur. Make sure you have a weather radio or an app that can override your phone's silent mode. If you're in one of the training storm zones, like eastern Ohio or West Virginia, take the flooding threat as seriously as the wind. Never drive into water across a road. 6 inches can sweep you off your feet. 12 inches can carry away a car. The road beneath might already be washed out. Turn around, don't drown. It's not just a slogan. It's a rule that has saved thousands of lives. Most flash flood deaths happen in cars. Don't become a statistic. If you're under the heat dome in the south, hydrate constantly. Don't wait until you're thirsty. Avoid the hottest parts of the day. Check on the vulnerable, the elderly, young children, anyone without AC. I also want to be straight with you about the uncertainty, because you deserve that honesty. The exact timing of the storms will be difficult to know more than 12 to 24 hours ahead of time. That's just the reality of this pattern. The storms will fire, but exactly when and where the most intense cells develop is still uncertain. What I'm confident in is the overall pattern, not the pinpoint details of a storm 5 or 6 days out. Everyone should be prepared to deal with storms, occasionally heavy with high winds and flash flooding possible. The pattern is the story, and the pattern is locked in. So even if the exact timing shifts, the overall message remains the same. This is going to be an active week of weather. As the days go on, some of these threats will sharpen while others fade, and I'll be here to update you every step of the way. Because in a pattern this active, catching the changes early is the whole point of following along. So what's the bottom line? This is a rare August pattern, one we haven't seen in years. A heat dome over the south is spinning off round after round of severe storms across the Midwest and Ohio Valley. The storms are relentless, the flooding is dangerous, and the heat is life-threatening. Storms and heat active at the same time, each demanding a different kind of awareness depending on where you live. Stay weather aware. Don't just check the forecast once and forget about it. The forecast is going to change. Conditions are going to shift. Stay informed. And look out for one another. Check on your neighbors. Check on the elderly. Check on anyone who might be vulnerable. Because that's how we get through this together. If this helped you understand what's coming, hit that like button. Because it helps more people find these forecasts when they need them most. If you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications. With this pattern locked in, I'll be tracking it closely and providing updates as the situation develops. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are you in the path of these storms? What's the weather like where you are? I read every single one. And if this helped you, check out my video on the bug fire near Reno. Stay weather aware out there. Look out for one another. I'll see you in the next one.